Okay, so let's get rolling. We'll just have people come in and they can hear what they hear or watch the recording later. Um, so before we get going, a little bit of housekeeping, if you will. I'm going to be sending out an email later, and it's going to be kind of a forceful get to weekly workshop on Monday, as well as any contracts classes that your market centers are having. Okay. You need to get to those immediately, as soon as possible. The changes that are happening, we've been talking about it for months now. Now they are having to be put in place. So let me ask, is there anyone on the call right now who currently has an open escrow, a signed BRBC, or a signed listing agreement with someone? Okay. Rick and Ernie, because we're going to talk about this in great detail on Monday, but I want to make sure that you guys are getting this information right away. And so to that end, everyone, when you do a BRBC listing agreement or purchase agreement moving forward, the new ones are live in the zip forms, and I have already filled them out as samples and put them in the toolkit. Okay. It's important that you use the new forms moving forward. If you currently have a listing agreement signed, there is a modification you must do before the 17th. And check with your broker, because your broker may require it before them. Some market centers are requiring it now that the forms are live. Some market centers are requiring it August 1st. So check with your local market center. But there is a form that is I imagine it's going to be temporary because it is specific to listing agreements signed before the new forms. And it is called, give me a second and I will tell you what it's called. Here we go. Hold on, I got to scroll down to it. There was, I ended up having 115 new pages and put in 24 new or revised documents into the toolkit yesterday. So the disclosure, if you have a listing agreement currently, and I'm going to share my screen. We're not going to go into great detail because we are going to on Monday. I just need you aware of this in case your market centers are requiring this sooner, okay? So we won't spend too much time before we get to our actual masterminding, but please ask any questions. It is called the DMLA revised form. And notice up here, it's disclosure and modification to listing agreement intended for use with a RLA revised or 1223 or earlier. Okay, so if you have a listing agreement that is not the current one that was released yesterday, you must give this disclosure to your client, because your current listing agreement states that you have an offer of compensation of whatever it states on your listing agreement, and that is in the MLS. As of August 17th or whatever date your local MLS chooses before then, that will be removed. So this is modifying that, stating that is no longer in the MLS. The compensation that was offered is no longer being offered, and it is not enforceable. Okay. Now, that still means you have to have a conversation with that seller about, you had already planned to compensate a buyer, so we still recommend that you do that while everything is negotiable. You may very well get an offer asking for the buyer's side compensation to be paid for by you, seller. And we already factored that into the price of the home when we listed it, right? So while you will not have to agree to that, you will likely be asked for that. And I need you to understand how the difference of how things will be moving forward. Okay. Again, we'll go into way more detail on this on Monday, but anyone on right now that has a listing, are you clear on what needs to happen? Okay. If you have a BRBC currently that was not the new one that was released yesterday with any of your clients signed, you must do this modification. Notice this one, it's the DMBR, intended for use with the BRBC revised 1222 or earlier. Okay. This again is stating that the seller's no longer offering compensation. So if you have a current BRBC that does not say that your buyer owes you compensation, you need to do this modification. This is required regardless of what's on your current one. Okay. And you're going to need to do the regular modification. This one, the buyer representation agreement. It's the modification of terms. There are now two different ones, one for buyer representation agreement, one for listing agreement, because you will need to add in what your compensation is and explain why this is changing. Okay. So otherwise, you won't be paid, and you cannot represent somebody without being paid. So anyone you have a BRBC with, you must do these two modifications. Oops, this one and the regular one that was just revised. Okay. Any questions about that?
I have a question on your terminology because we just had a training yesterday that Dan gave us, and it's like, and you mentioned a couple weeks ago about sellers not being able to offer, and it's they from what I was told, and then even in our training, they can still offer it. You just can't put it on the MLS.
That is correct. But remember, Ernie, when we said that, I said that take that with a grain of salt. This has been a moving conversation.
Right.
So right now, as of our understanding, that is correct. What Dan said, the seller absolutely can offer compensation.
Mhm.
We cannot put it in the MLS. And the MLSs that are going to allow for concessions to be offered in the MLS, we cannot state that compensation to a buyer as part of that, even if that's what we mean. We can't say it, right? But the seller absolutely can offer compensation. And you can tell anybody that asks that my seller is willing to look at offers that request buyer's compensation.
Yeah, so I've seen marketing flyers and stuff already on like there I saw one that the seller was offering closing costs, and then another one literally on that says seller offers cooperative compensation of 2.5% on the flyers and the advertisements and stuff. So
As
um
far as we know, that is going to be legal, but make sure before you offer compensation in any public forum, you double check with your broker how they want that handled.
right,
It
right.
absolutely cannot be no questions asked on the MLS. And there's still other talk of things. As far as we know, it's still legal to do it in other ways.
Right.
But just check, each of you check with how your specific broker wants it handled. Okay. Because each broker could tell you something different for their own comfort level or their own understanding. So please, everything we say, we are in touch with all the brokers. Sometimes they change their mind after we say things, or things change after we know things. So please always double check with your broker on any questions. Okay. Um, Ernie, you have an open escrow. Is it going to close before August 17th?
He's signing next August 1st, but I that's with a new home sale, so they're handling all that. So
Yeah.
but
You shouldn't have anything to worry about. As long as it closes, as long as any open escrow closes before August 17th, you should be good as written.
yeah, they're signing the docs Sunday. The guy, crazy. It got extended. It got extended. The guy took off, went out of country, and so now he's flying back from Canada to Michigan to sign and meet the escrow. And in Michigan. It's nuts. I'm just like going, oh, but it was supposed to close on like the 16th. 16th or 17th.
Well, those things happen.
Mhm.
But okay,
But
so
I do have a BRBC, and so I just gotta, get them to sign the addendum, right?
um, yes,
Um,
and you might check with Dan as long as it closes next week, you may not need to.
well,
Um,
no, this is another client that's right now a
oh yes,
buyer.
then I absolutely would. You're gonna want to have those conversations. So you guys, anyone you have a BRBC with, any buyer you're working with, you do not have a BRBC with, you need to get one. Okay. And you need to do the modification for those of you that already have them signed.
Right.
That is required. Each broker is having different requirements. I got an email today from one broker for Carlsbad and Chino Hills. They want those modifications signed and in command by the 29th of this month. So each broker is going to have a different date they want you to do that. Some might be fine to let it go till the 17th. There is a contracts class for anyone who Troy and CB are brokers for at 1 o'clock today, which I will also be in. I'm sure we'll get some direction there. So again, this is a moving thing, but all the forms are live. So I think all our conversations that we're aware of can happen moving forward. Okay.
Mhm.
We're going to have a very detailed discussion about this on Monday at the workshop and how you can present these things to your clients to have a seamless transition. Okay. As a heads up, before Monday, if you read the new BCA broker compensation agreement, there's a copy of it in the toolkit that will help our conversation and your understanding of our conversation on Monday. Okay, so please, the weekly workshops for the foreseeable future are going to be around all of our new forms, contracts, forms attached to if boxes are checked, and the conversations we should be having to ensure smooth transactions. So please be there. Okay, we're going to have some good discussion around that. Okay, before we move on into our normal mastermind, Ben, question?
Yeah, so what's happening on August 17th?
So August 17th is a deadline that has been set by the NAR settlement where all of the new forms that were just released will have to be used moving forward.
Okay.
So remember, also that means moving forward, as of August 17th, unless your broker requires sooner, you may not show a house in any way, shape, or form, meaning in person, via video, FaceTime, whatever. You may not show a property unless you have a BRBC signed.
Okay.
That BRBC must include compensation for you to work with that buyer.
And who's paying for this compensation? Is it out of the loan or is it the out of pocket or where's the compensation coming from now?
The buyers are the one who will be responsible to pay their portion of the broker's compensation. Now, Ben, we're going to have lots of training on this, okay? So make sure you're coming to our Monday weekly workshops because
Okay.
we're going to be bringing you those conversations.
Okay.
Next Friday,
Yeah.
your coaches, all of your coaches will be putting together videos of those conversations and what they should look like so you can reference them.
Okay.
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 So hopefully by the following week, we'll have those put together, edited, and posted for you.
Okay.
So we're doing everything we can to help you before the deadline, okay?
So the deadline is August 17th, that's for the forms. So for
Yes.
the new forms. Okay.
Yes. But Ben, you're in Carlsbad, right?
Yes.
I believe they want you to start using the new forms now. So you might just go
Most people
check with.
do, I believe. I mean, it
Yeah.
should start it now, so it's in place, so you don't have to. If you did the old form right now, in 2 weeks, you're gonna have to do all the addendums and everything, so you might as well start using the new forms now. And what's the other form that's the shorter for 3 properties? And that you
I forgot what that's called.
BR, it's or RP,
Yeah, single SP,
yeah,
single
SPK,
property.
EIO.
I know. Hang on, what is it? Is it in this email? I've got so many emails on this, you guys.
I mean, I have it downstairs in the.
Yeah, it's SP something, single property.
I think it's PRSA,
Yes,
preliminary.
preliminary buyers or whatever, PRSA.
Okay,
Sales
well,
agreement.
it's in the car forms, okay?
Yeah.
And you can have that signed for 1 to 3 properties, I believe. You can put up to 3
Oh.
properties on that. So anyway, we will be getting all of this information to you. That one I don't believe I put in the toolkit because I was replacing what was in there, and that's brand new. So let me make a note about that.
Yeah, because is that the one you use with, if you're doing an open house and they're not represented?
On property
The
view.
same one, or is there another one on top of that?
Yeah, there's the open house, single visitor,
Right.
something. Anyway, more acronyms to learn. We'll get it all down. Okay, so our Monday weekly workshops, we're going to be bringing all of this to you. We can also use this forum for those questions temporarily. So, because the more we talk about this, the better. Okay. So, any questions you guys have in regard to that, we will address in either forum, but I don't want us to lose the focus of this forum, which is masterminding around moving your business forward. And that can be argued. It's making sure we know the conversations to take place, right? So,
That's what I was gonna talk about as far as the conversations leading forward and how to implement this and discuss it with your clients and the, proper ways of presenting it,
correct.
because I mean, it's still all around value, your value and how you present it and them, paying their compensation.
It is. And you have to know your value and be able to articulate your value in order to do that. So one of the things, I mean, all of you as agents, particularly those of you that are brand new, do you even know everything involved in a transaction? Everything that you'll bring to the table for your clients? So these are things we're going to be working on bringing you. We can put in list form to help you be able to articulate all the things that you're helping them with. As you gain experience and you help negotiate through things, you'll be able to tell those stories as part of your value. So for instance, saving somebody thousands of dollars because of a negotiation that you did, right? So these are all things that as they happen throughout your career, you'll add them to your value and to ways that you help people. Make sure you're collecting testimonials from people, even if you haven't done real estate with them. What other business have you done with them or relationship do you have that they can provide a testimonial on your work ethic and your character, right? So just because some of you are brand new doesn't mean there isn't value that's brought to the table. Okay, you just have to learn how to articulate that value and identify what that value is. And that's going to be very, very important as we move forward. We're going to be bringing those discussions to you here in this forum as well. But I will, to Ernie's comment there, let me share the screen again. There is a document it can stand alone, and it is going to be a part of the BRBC, the RPA, and the RLA. You know how we always have lots of documents attached to each of those? Well, we got a new one. We actually have 2 new ones for the listing agreement. This is the document that's going to really help you. So would it be helpful to everyone if we go through this document today together, and I can show you spots where you don't have to read anything to your client word for word, but what you do need to know is what these documents say so that you can articulate the essence of them. Okay. So moving forward, we will have a buyer or a broker compensation advisory attached to the BRBC, RPA, and RLA. Okay, the buyer representation agreement, listing agreement, and purchase agreement. So it starts off with the sellers. When sellers list their property for sale through a real estate broker, they agree to pay the seller's broker when escrow closes. Okay, that's not changed. Listing agreement compensation is fully negotiable. That statement has to be a part of your vocabulary in listing appointments moving forward. As we've mentioned before, they've always been negotiable. It's always been in all of California's forms. That's always been made public. But what often happens is agents will fill out the listing agreement, they'll put in their percentage, they'll go to the listing appointment, they'll get it signed, and compensation is never even addressed. Okay, and that worked for a long time. Now we have to address it. Okay, they must be told that it is negotiable. Now, that doesn't mean you have to negotiate your fee lower. If you're bringing the value, your fee is your fee, right? That doesn't have to change. You just have to let them know it's negotiable, but here's why, here's what I charge and why. Okay. Additional optional compensation if buyer is unrepresented. This is a new checkbox on the RLA. This means that a listing agreement will have the compensation that the seller owes the broker for selling the home, as well as additional compensation that you'll charge if you're helping the transaction with an unrepresented buyer. It doesn't mean you represent that buyer, but it means a buyer came to you on their own because they refused to sign a BRBC with somebody or whatever the reason is, and you still have to facilitate the transaction. So you can charge an additional fee to the seller for that. There's a spot on the new RLA.
How do you say your name? I'm sorry.
Jodi?
Jody. Here's a quick question, maybe really quick. So let's say, for example, or maybe this is for a Monday meeting, but you can tell me, let's say, for example, a buyer refuses, like you just brought up, if a buyer refuses to sign the BRBC with a different agent, or he signs it with a different agent, and then he goes to the other agent, he buys it with the help of the different agent, then his previous agent gets paid? Or who gets paid on that scenario?
Okay,
Both.
so the person who gets paid is who the written agreement is with. So if a buyer has a written agreement with an agent, represent them, the buyer's going to pay that agent.
Okay.
Okay. The paragraph we just talked about is if a buyer comes to you and is not represented by anyone.
Okay.
Okay.
So sometimes they don't know, or they don't understand because they don't know about this. So if they don't know and they accidentally go to the agent, then the previous agent, the agent that they have the agreement signed with, that's the one that's going to get paid, whether they get paid with the new one or with the old one.
So it's your responsibility as the agent
To tell them.
to find out if they already have a written agreement with another agent.
So ask them.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
That's
one of the first questions you should ask anybody that you're working with. Okay. So
okay.
Ben, go back and watch last week's PC Mastermind and weekly workshop from this week. They're posted in the WhatsApp and on Facebook, and they're on our YouTube page. That's some of that question that you just answered will be answered in those videos.
It's there. Okay. Makes sense. Thanks, Jodi.
You're welcome. Okay. Buyer may represent both buyer and seller, dual agency. That is the same. Everybody understands what dual agency is, right? It's not you personally representing both sides. It's your brokerage representing both sides. Could be you, but it's your brokerage representing both sides. Okay. Now here's where this is some new stuff. Broker agreements with buyers. Buyer representation compensation is fully negotiable. Again, we have to negotiate. We have to learn how to communicate because buyers are going to say, well, why should I pay you that much? I found the house, because they're all using the internet, right? We're going to talk more about those types of things later. This is just to go over this right now, okay? So when a buyer enters into a representation agreement with the broker, the buyer authorizes the broker to locate properties for the buyer to buy and agrees to pay the buyer's broker if a transaction is completed. Compensation amounts are not fixed by law and fully negotiable. Okay. When negotiating compensation, the parties may discuss factors such as the broker's expertise and experience, the type of broker services to be performed, and the broker's time and expenses, among other considerations. Okay. Requirement for written agreement. This is important, and this paragraph is going to help you talk to your buyers. Pursuant to a nationwide class action settlement reached by NAR, participants in MLS are required to have a written agreement with a buyer prior to showing a buyer a residential property or giving a buyer a tour of such property. You are no longer allowed to show a property without a buyer representation agreement. So this is going to help those of you that have been nervous about saying, I can't show you that unless you sign a buyer representation agreement. It's built in now, and as of January 1st, this is actually going to become California law. So not only will you be doing something unethical and breaking DRE rules if you show a property without a BRBC, come January 1, you'll also be breaking the law. Okay.
Here's another quick question, Jody. What about the open houses, the buyers that come in?
Okay.
That doesn't change anything there?
Yes, there's lots of changes, and we can't go over them all in one breath, but we will get to them. Yes, there's changes. Yes, there's a form for that, a new one. They will be required to sign in. We'll get to that, Ben. Rochelle, did you have something?
Yeah, say I wanted to represent myself. Do we still have to sign something like this if we're representing ourselves to buy a house?
Great question, and probably double check with the broker, but you have to have something signed to enter a property, so I'm gonna guess yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
That is a very unique question that we can double check with the broker on. Okay, advantages to written agreements. Buyers and their brokers benefit when the terms of their relationship and respective duties are in writing. A written agreement establishes clear mutual expectations and helps avoid misunderstandings over the buyer and broker's duties and the amount of compensation a buyer's agent is to be paid. When enlisting a real estate broker to represent them, buyers agree to pay the buyer's broker when escrow closes, but the person responsible for payment may be negotiated in the transaction. Okay, so buyer pays the compensation or seller pays the compensation. So buyer can negotiate that the seller pay it. Now there's going to be other forms for that. We're going to go over those. Okay, so stay tuned. Seller pays the compensation. So if buyer negotiates for seller to compensate buyer's broker, a buyer may make a conditional offer to the seller, just like any other offer, by including a term in the purchase offer asking the seller to pay the buyer's broker if the buyer has already agreed to pay their own broker pursuant to the BRBC. Okay, if such a term is included in the purchase offer, the request will become one term among many, just like home warranty, closing costs, escrow, blah, blah, blah. Okay, among that the seller may accept, reject, or negotiate by way of counteroffer. The possibility of asking the seller to pay the buyer's contractual obligation option should be discussed when creating a buyer representation agreement and prior to an offer being made. Okay. Buyer's agent negotiates an agreement directly with seller. If a seller is unrepresented, so like a FSBO, or does not have an exclusive agency relationship with another broker, a buyer's broker may approach that seller, asking the seller to sign an agreement. Here we go, SP, single party compensation agreement, That's not for the single property, but this is a different one. To pay the buyer's broker. In this situation, the seller agrees to pay the buyer's broker compensation without necessarily creating an agency relationship with the broker. When that happens, the buyer's broker is advised to use the seller non-agency to inform the seller that the buyer's broker will be acting on behalf of the buyer only and not act as the seller's agent throughout the transaction. However, because the seller is unrepresented, the buyer's agent will inevitably have to do more work to facilitate the transaction, which may be factored into the negotiation of the single party compensation agreement. Changing practice, and this is going to be another paragraph that's going to help you talk to your clients. Changing practice related to a seller's broker's offer of compensation. Historically, in California, many sellers brokers used an MLS to make an unilateral offer to compensate a buyer's broker who procured a buyer for the seller's property. However, the nationwide NAR settlement prohibits the seller's broker from using an MLS to make such an offer of compensation. The CAR listing agreement forms no longer provide for such offers of cooperating broker compensation, nor does CAR include other forms in its library of forms that might facilitate such offers. Buyers and sellers must separately negotiate compensation with their respected brokers as specified above. Okay. Any questions on this form?
I have one.
Okay.
That's at the beginning, 1B, optional additional compensation if the buyer's unrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
So if the buyer is not represented, then the seller pays the additional fees?
Yes, and let me show you. Maybe that'll resonate here. Let me show you the new RLA. So this is the new listing agreement. Okay. Make sure it's got the grid, which it didn't before. Make sure it says RLA revised 724. I think it's the only one that will be available to you. So right here in C, this is where it's making it clear it's negotiable. C1, this is your compensation as the list agent. This is where you're going to put your fee in. Okay. That part is the same as before. Remember, it used to be if you charged, and all percentages are negotiable, but if you charged 6% and you offered 3% to the other side, in that scenario, this would say 3%. Okay, nothing to the other side would be on here. That's no longer a part of this form. Okay, now this is what that additional compensation, Matt, the question you were asking. You check the box, additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. And then you would put the amount, the percentage or flat fee that you will have them pay you to facilitate a transaction with an unrepresented buyer. Okay, keeping in mind, you're going to be doing a lot more work. So, I mean, I know what I would put here. There's a minimum number I would put here. But that is negotiable. So part of how you're going to do this is being able to explain your value and explaining why and what that is. Okay. So these are the conversations we're going to be having lots of practice on. Your coaches are going to create those videos next week. We're going to have them up hopefully the beginning of the following week. After we get them all edited and put together, edit out any laughing or coughing or weird things that might happen. Because we want to make sure that you can watch that as it would happen with a client and as you should be doing it with a client. Okay. Any other questions on that?
I do, Jodi. I'm not sure, so I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Do most brokerages say that you can only list solo typically?
That you can only list what?
Solo is your, like if you have a friend and they want to sell their house and they want to use you as an agent and you're a friend of theirs and you're like, well, I can do it for 1%. And your broker says, oh, no, you can't go below 2%.
Okay, so low. I thought you said solo. I was like, huh?
No, solo, sorry, my
Yes,
misunderstanding.
yes, almost every brokerage, and this is their right to do because
Mhm.
there's a cost of doing business. So we can't just say, "Oh, I'll sell your home for $500," right? That doesn't cover anyone's cost of doing business.
Mhm.
So, I don't know what everyone's number is. I do know most of your market centers, the minimum you can charge per side without consent from your broker is 2%.
Mhm. Doesn't that go in the face of the whole lawsuit of saying you can't have a standard fee?
No, because the broker has the right to set the fee, what they charge. Now, does it mean it can't be negotiated? No. But it's just like, for instance, if I'm going to list a property, I'm personally still going to charge 3% because I know the value I provide. I know that I'm going to do the job I'm telling them I'm going to do. I'm going to get them the money that they need and want.
Mhm.
Right?
But if it's a friend and you want to save them money and you're okay with charging them less, and the brokerage is saying, no, 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 2% minimum,
Then it's 2% minimum. And that does not go against the lawsuit. There's a cost of doing business. Let's say, Michelle, for sake of argument here, let's say every agent in the market center this year ended up having a friend or family member they were helping and they didn't want to really charge them anything other than, whatever fee they had to pay or their out of pocket expenses, right?
Mhm.
And the market center makes $0, right? How does the market center stay open? How do they pay the rent? How do they pay the lights? How do they keep everything going for you to have a place to work in? So they can have a minimum amount to charge. It's just like you wouldn't charge somebody if you had a retail shop and every single person that came in was your friend and you only ever charged them the cost of the goods that you're selling them, you'd never make a profit, 1 penny to cover your other expenses. You still have to pay overhead, right?
Mhm.
So it is within their right. And
It just seems interesting because I feel like if the whole thing is, well, you can't say commission, but you can say concessions, and the whole lawsuit is about it being negotiating, and then they're saying, nope, we're flat rate 2%. Well, then we've stopped negotiating. And if they want to stay in business, then that's our monthly fee to them. Like it just, I don't know. That's
okay, so let me maybe answer this a little bit clearer. First of all, let's reread this. Compensation notice. The amount or rate of real estate commissions is not fixed by law. In other words, CAR, NAR, no entity can tell a broker or an agent what they have to charge.
Mhm.
They are set by each broker individually. So the broker has the right to set the minimum fee
Got it.
and may be negotiable between seller and broker. Now, what all brokers are telling you is that there is a minimum you have to charge unless you come to me and get express permission to do otherwise. And then you can talk to them on a case by case. Therefore, nothing's fixed. It is negotiable, and they absolutely have that right. But here's the thing that I want to caution every single one of you about working with a friend or family member. We always want to help people, and that's great. And we should. That's where we should be coming from. I promise you, 99% of the time, your friends and family member are going to be your worst, most horrible client that you wish you never helped, especially if you give them a deal.
Yep.
The best way to give them a deal, if you really want to help them, is in the end, surprise them with a cash gift
Mhm.
that they don't even know they're getting. Okay? Don't be making deals just because they're friends and family, because I promise you that will come back to bite you most of the time.
It was just more for a scenario. I'm not looking to give anyone a deal. It was just the whole commission and it being non-negotiable. And my mind went to, well, we have a set rate. with our office, like you cannot go below that. But I see in the contract where you pointed that out, that each broker has the right to have a minimum rate. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Good. And it's okay. These questions are great, you guys, because I promise you, you're not the only one that has those questions, right? These are great questions, and please ask them. And just don't be offended when I get a little coachy about why we should or shouldn't do things, because really we're here to protect you and make sure that you're getting what you need. Ben?
You made a good comment. Maybe we should try to make friends that have really good equity. So when we sell their houses, they're happy, and then we should also get at least 2%, which is if they're getting when they sell their houses, if they're getting $500,000 at least, it should, our commission is nothing in comparison to what they're getting. So they should be happy just because they sold their house, sold it quick, it was, and then plus, we get a little bit, it's not much, 2% at $1 million is not really a lot. It's a comparison to what they're getting. So
Yeah, it's about the job we're doing. We're a professional like anybody else. If they go to a hospital and have surgery done by a family member or surgeon, which likely won't happen, but if they were, the hospital doesn't charge any less because their surgeon was a family member, right? That they still have all the overhead. They still have all of that.
Yeah.
So, just be careful with that and just really know your value.
Yeah.
But it was a great question, Michelle, because I can see where that could be misunderstood. So thank you for asking it. What
And
other questions?
The negotiation aspect of it, you can always say no. On either side, it's like, I mean, if you've got a set rate and this is your set value and somebody wants to, lowball you or whatever, you can say no, I'm worth more than that, and I put too much into it, and but I've worked with early on with a family member, and it was a real pain in the ass, and they even went and after me doing a bunch of work went with somebody else. And it's like,
happens all
what was that? And then got into a contract and wanted to ask me for advice.
That happens all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And at that point, just say, I'm sorry, you're in contract with that agent. You have to ask that agent. I can't legally give you advice.
Yeah, I can't tell you.
Yeah. So really, I am thrilled about these changes. I know you've heard me say this because this is going to make all of us be the professionals that we should have been all along. We have always coached every one of you to not work with a buyer without a BRBC. Have every one of you done that? You don't have to admit, you don't have to answer. I'm not asking for you to give yourselves up. The truth is most agents don't, okay? And this is best practice. This is going to make us even more professional. It's going to make us live up to our value, right? And make sure we're doing our jobs properly. And so stick with us over the next few weeks. We're going to really help you with those conversations. And please, for the next few weeks, this mastermind, the workshop, ask all the questions, okay? I know typically this forum is set for, well, I have this scenario, what would I do? And we mastermind together. And if others have had that experience, we're still going to do that. But we're going to be a little lenient for the next few weeks in if other questions come up, because while you've got people here to help, we want to make sure by the time this goes live, you are fully locked and loaded, so to speak, to be able to work with your clients.
Yeah, I mean, the law as far as not working together or not showing a property is like I mean, I don't know how many people have heard on as far as presenting a BRBC or a contract. It's like, oh no, I'm loyal. I can't believe you make me want to sign that. And it's now I can go, no, we have to. It's legally, and contracts are what's the saying? Contracts are made for problems or something. I don't know, but I forget the saying.
They help keep relationships intact. When it's in writing, we know what we're doing, right? Rick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Just wanted to say, I've been doing buyer's representation agreements for about 1.5 years, trying to, and some people were so cool and just like it didn't happen, didn't need to, but the ones they gave me a hard time about it and were really kind of, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but cocky.
Wishy-washy.
Yeah, something like that. Used to sign it, and I ended up helping them out anyways. There was a couple. It wasn't worth it. So it's not worth it. So when we start doing this on the Natch, and somebody doesn't want to do it, you probably didn't want to work with them anyways.
Mhm.
That's true story. That's a true story.
And I also wonder though, Rick, if you're looking at, I mean, and this is going to depend on the market that you're in, but if you're looking for a buyer that's going to be paying you $30,000 commission and you barely know the person, there's going to be that hesitation.
Well, that
behind that.
graph that Jody pointed out in there where it says that
Mhm.
can negotiate with the seller, I don't think a whole lot's going to change really, because if they want to sell
Right.
the house, hopefully the listing agent's doing his job by saying, hey, we want to sell this thing, we need to offer compensation, not in MLS, of course, but I don't really think it's going to change a whole lot. Hopefully not.
My hope is that, the 80-20 rule, it applies to almost everything, right? I'm hoping that kind of applies here. Matter of fact, I hope it's less than 20% that go rogue or weird or get crazy on us. But really, if you think about it, the only thing that should change is how we present these agreements to them and how we set the expectations, right? When we talk to a buyer about a home inspection and we set the expectation that this is not for you to find everything wrong with the house and nitpick in a request for repair, right? It's for you to learn about your house and how to take care of it and where the emergency shutoff valves are. And if there's anything glaring, maybe a safety issue, not to nitpick, right? Same thing when on the flip side, when we set the expectation with the seller, the buyer's going to do inspections and we will likely get a request for repair. If something on that is a true safety issue, we really need to consider taking care of that, right? So and that's a shortened version for time's sake, but setting the expectations is so important and helps things later not go wrong that could go wrong. So this is no different, right? Our sellers, when we're at the listing appointment, we're talking to them about compensation and talking to them about pricing their home. And this is where we've really got to get good with our conversation. Listen, seller, we in the past, the price of the home, the retail price of the home, so to speak, right? The market value we've always priced homes according to the sold comps, which have always included compensation for both the buyer and the seller's agent. Now, because we're not required to offer that compensation and we can't offer it in the MLS any longer, that doesn't mean you won't be asked to pay the compensation. There will be lots of buyers out there that cannot purchase a home without the help of that. So when pricing your home, we want to take that into consideration. If you do not want to offer compensation at all and aren't even willing to entertain it, then we're going to probably have to price your home a little lower.
Mhm.
Right? And so, and then, continue that conversation in reasoning. Same thing when we're talking to a buyer. If we're going to ask for compensation, then, how is the home priced? Is it priced below market value because we think they don't want us to ask? Then we're going to have to be offering more to be able to ask for that. That conversation doesn't change. It's just around compensation versus closing costs or whatever else, right? So we just have to get really good at those expectations and explaining. Just because the lawsuit says we don't have to and it can't be put in the MLS doesn't change buyers' ability or inability to buy if they have to pay their agent. And our goal.
Go ahead, Jodi. Sorry.
I was just going to finish it off with our goal is to get your home sold for the most amount of money in the least amount of time with the least amount of hassle. And this is my recommendation. We price it here. We entertain offers that include that.
I think that one of the things I've seen is with a VA buyer, they're getting notices from the VA saying you are absolutely not supposed to be charged for brokerage as a buyer for commission, sorry, like compensation, concessions, commission. And so I've had a text from someone saying, oh, should we hold off on buying? Because then we don't have to pay, on the other end to our realtor. And I said, no, you don't want to do that. It's all going to work out. It's a little messy right now. But I'm just wondering, like, my mind just wonders, like, what's the big picture of this? Is this all just so that the consumer on either side, whether you're selling or buying, know that it's something that's negotiable, opposed to how it's always been, even though, like Rick said, like, probably things won't change that much, and we have to show our value and explain to our sellers, like, you want to list it, including that in there. Fantastic if they come in with the BRBC and the buyer's paying for it, but if not, you want to have that money there. If they have that representation, hey, you just made an extra 20 grand, like, I'm just trying to wonder what's the big picture of it all? Is it just for the consumer to be aware on either side?
That really is the gist of it. That's the crux of it, is for the consumer to be aware. In California, the consumer always has been aware. That has apparently not been the case elsewhere. Truthfully, this whole thing is silly because that same seller that brought this lawsuit and is complaining about it, if he went and bought another house, he did not pay his buyer's agent. So I don't even know what if you think about it, it's all silly. But here is the thing. This is all good because now we all have to be the professionals we should have been all along. We have to give the value. And if we're giving the value, our clients are going to pay for it. Price is only an issue in the absence of value, right? People will pay more for a particular brand of something because it's better than another one or stands up longer. This is a silly example, but I have Farberware pots and pans from my grandma that are older than me. And so that's over 50 years old, that still look almost new and work great to this day. Now, some of the new brands, even of that brand, I mean, how long does an average person keep a pot or a pan that's been made in the last 20 years? A couple years and they have to throw it away and get a new one, right? So the point is, they could be way more expensive, but if the value's there, that's all that matters. And so all of this is going to play out. It's going to shake out. The lenders are the ones we have to ask the questions to when it comes to, buyers can be paid or not. My understanding was VA was working to make something happen so that they could still buy with ease with all of this. I haven't heard where that's landed. So these are all things that we'll find out as we move forward. So when those questions come up, please reach out to your trusted lender. Reach out to your local lenders in your market center.
I think VA already agreed that the VA buyer can bring money to the table. They can pay a compensation. Before they couldn't pay a buyer's compensation. Now they can. Something like that.
I know there was a concession made that is different from what it used to be because of this.
Yeah. So they're starting to, the lenders are starting to get they're starting to all revamp and come up with other things. There's a lot of them are offering closing costs on top of the loan, things like that, to help the buyer buy the house. But then, on the seller side too, another thing is you're adding value to your home or to your transaction, like you said, to sell the house quicker, but also bring a qualified buyer with qualified representation by offering the cooperative compensation. So there's that aspect, and it's a no-brainer if you're sitting across the table and understand the transaction or explain the transaction to the person across the table, how it's going to be smoother if you do it,
Yep.
So
absolutely. So please join me on Monday. We're going to be having a continuing conversation of this. We're going to be going over in more detail and some conversation strategies that you can have. I didn't know we'd take the whole hour talking about this, and that's okay because this is obviously when we do, this is what we need, right? So that is fantastic. Jada, in a future mastermind, we will mastermind around some of those things like the events and the home buying seminars and things like that, because they are a valuable tool and thing that you can use to get clients. Let's get our heads clear around the conversations we should be having with our clients, and then let's go out and find them so we can have our conversations. Okay. All right, guys, we're here. If you need anything, reach out to us and we'll see you soon. If
Thank you.
you're in Market Center with the Meggers group, make sure you get on the contracts class right now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jody. Thank you.
I do.